Have you ever had to create presentations or decks to present your designs, or maybe to create presentations for your clients? You know, there are so many different ways to not only to create presentations, but also to use presentations. Sometimes we use them to attract clients. Sometimes we use them to present our ideas, to pitch our ideas. And sometimes we sell the templates for presentations. Sometimes we sell the presentations themselves, or we create presentations for the clients. Or when you're creating, for example, a webinar for yourself, if you want to sell, for example, a course, or you're creating a presentation, a webinar in the form of presentation for your client, well, you have to know how to create them. This will be not just one lesson. Otherwise, it would be like a really huge, like about 2 hours lesson. And I don't want to overwhelm you all at once. So it will be a series of lessons, not one by one, but today we'll cover some really important topics about presentations. And then after a few lessons about some other things, we will get back to presentations and we will add more and more and more. I designed this course a specific way that will help you to actually achieve the best results. And you will see when we will get back to presentations in the next part, you will see that between this lesson and the next one about presentation, we will cover so many important topics, so many important ideas and the ways to create something, so you will be able to use them in the presentations. So let's dive into the presentations with Figma. Because presentation is a graphic design, it's a graphic design module. Well, presentations with Figma. What do we have to keep in mind every single time when we create, I would say absolutely anything, but because we are talking about presentations, yes, presentations. First of all, it's strategy, then user experience, storytelling, content, grid, layout, typography, adjustments, if we have to make some, style, graphics, test, animations in motion, and presentation. I haven't included here colors, but honestly, colors is also an important thing. I just thought that it will be great just to cover them in styles. Okay, let's go one by one. Let's cover each of these items and learn a little bit more about design in general, so you will be able to apply the same approach whether you're designing a website or a mobile application or a game or TV application or some ATM machine UI. It doesn't matter. If you follow this specific flow that described here, you will be able, your process, your workflow will be more efficient and much, much easier. So let's dive into strategy. Strategy goes first. Before that, as you can see, there is a grid on the background. I just want to show you that, well, there can be a grid for a presentation as well. And this is unconventional grid. I'll explain you later how to create one and why I created it specifically this way a little bit later, but for now, I'll switch it off. So I need to select Command G. Strategy. A good presentation always starts with strategy. And what is strategy? In just a few words, strategy is the path from point A to point B that you're creating for your project, product, or business. Or life, even life, yeah. It works for absolutely everything. But here, because we are talking about presentation, let's cover strategy for the presentation. So there is a point A. What is that? And point B. What's that? Well, point A is where you are right now with this presentation. Are you designing this presentation for a client? Are you designing it to pitch your idea? Are you designing it to present your ideas during the show and tell for your company? Are you designing a webinar? What is that? Where are you starting from? What's your point A? And the next thing is, what is your point B? Where are you moving to? It means that should it be a presentation in a corporate style? Should it be something in a really creative way or minimalistic way? What's the goal of this presentation? Like to convert, to get a client? How many slides? Actually, it doesn't matter, but we'll cover it later. So when we understand the point A and point B, we can start thinking how we can get from point A from the current position to point B. What will be the best way? Because honestly, usually people think that strategy is something just one thing. No, there can be like multiple strategies to achieve the same goal. Some of them are better, some of these ways are shorter, some of them are real long, and some of them will not bring you to your goal while you think like, yeah, that's a good idea, and then you start working and boom, I'm not there. And then you start from the very beginning. Strategic thinking is really important for any person, whether you're a designer, developer, manager, content creator, thought leader, it doesn't matter. When you have strategic thinking, you're able to achieve your goals much faster because you are thinking about the what way I will choose, what approach I will choose to get to my goal. And when it comes to presentation, you also think about it. Okay, I have to create a presentation. What it should be, who is it for, what's the goal of it, what the final goal that I want to achieve, and what will be the best way, the fastest way for me to achieve that. And then you understand that, maybe I have to think a little bit more about it, about the presentation, about all other aspects of the presentation, and then it will be much easier for me to create this presentation. So think about strategy as the art of building a path from point A to point B. And the more you create strategies, the much easier it will be for you in the future to create the best ones for absolutely everything. Because strategy and strategic thinking is like a skill. And the more you practice, the better you become. So every single time when you're thinking about something for your life, for your business, for the product that you are going to build, whether it's a website or mobile application, or even for the project like a presentation. What do you want to achieve? Where you are right now, what do you have? Do you have content? Do you know who you're designing for? So collect all this information first. And once you have the information, it will be much easier for you to do that. And this is where we come to the next point, where from strategy, we'll go to user experience. And you might think, well, it's a graphic design. Why user experience? You know what? Like everything in our life is user experience. You see me right now, right here in this circle, in this where I am right now. So you see this presentation above me, and you see me, you see my face. And it shows you, okay, this is the content, and this is the person who is talking. So I understand, I have this connection. This is user experience. But at the same time, I could, like even the sound here, you can clearly hear me, right? You can see this presentation. You see how I go from slide to slide to bring you this knowledge, to make it really valuable and helpful for you so you can use it later. This is user experience. Every single aspect is user experience. And when you're creating a presentation, you also have to think about user experience. And how does it work when it comes to presentations? What is the user experience of the presentation? Well, you have to know where this presentation will be presented, by who it will be presented, who is the audience, who are the people who will watch this presentation, then how it will be presented, what time of the day will it be, what is the room where this presentation will be presented, like when, where exactly, and I'll give you examples in a second. And what will be the next steps? So once it will be presented, where it will go next? All of these things are really important. Ask as much questions as possible, and then little by little you will understand what is the most important when it comes to presentation and what is least important, so you can start from the first important, you can prioritize things. So let's go step by step. Who is the audience? And not only who is the audience, who will be presenting it, and who is the audience, who will be hearing and seeing this presentation. Who is presenting? Maybe it will be you, maybe it will be someone else, maybe you're designing it for someone else. And here we will have two different user experiences, because if you're designing it for you, for yourself, well, then you can follow particular ideas where you understand, okay, I'll skip this slide, I'll skip this information because it's I will just talk about it. But when you create it for someone else, you have to work in a collaboration with that person and understand how it works. Then where audience, who it will be presented to. Will it be a client? Will it be your manager? Will it be other designers from your company? Or will it be not presented at all, but it will be presented in the form of a product somewhere on Creative Market, and you're just gonna create a template for the presentation, and then you're gonna sell it? Then it will be designed in a little bit different way. Who is the audience? Are these people like a corporate people, business people, other designers? Are they more creative, casual? All of these things important because they will define the style that you're creating it for. And also they will define what will be included in the presentation. Next thing is where. Well, where it will be presented. As I said already, it can be Creative Market, or maybe it will be in a small room just from your laptop, showing like, look, so here and the next slide and the next one, just showing the person that is over the shoulder. Or maybe it will be a conference room, not a small one, a little bit bigger one, and will be presented on a TV, like 60-inch TV. It also user experience. Or will it be presented on a huge wall somewhere in the conference hall for 2,000 people. And then the design will be a little bit different because you will have to keep in mind also the huge screen, and you don't need to overwhelm people with information because they will not be able to read everything. But at the same time, you will have to keep in mind light. So if it's a really dark conference hall, in this case, it's better to create your presentation in a dark mode, in dark theme, because it will be easier to consume the information, to digest the information. If it will be presented in a Lightroom, not in Lightroom, Adobe Lightroom, but in the bright room, so the room where there is lots of light. In this case, if it will be dark presentation, then it will be too much light and it will be really huge contrast between the background of the presentation and the text itself and the room itself. So in this case, it's better to create the presentation in light colors. So where is also important. Then when it will be presented. You might be thinking, well, does it matter? Well, I would say yes. So for example, if you're presenting in the morning, then you can have a little bit different mood in your presentation. If it will be presented really in the evening, like late, almost late night, when everyone is already tired after a real long and hard working day, in this case, it's better to make your presentation a little bit more engaging rather than corporate with lots of text with boring typography. So when it will be presented, also part of the user experience. Then how it will be presented, because it can be just showing slides, or someone will be talking about it. Also, how many slides per talk there will be. Will be all the entire information on the slide, or on the slide we will have just main like key points, and then the speaker will present everything else. The next thing is how like how it will be presented. Will it be a webinar, sales webinar? Or will it be just a fun pitch during the show and tell in your company? Hey guys, look at what I just created today. It's mind-blowing animation that we created for our product, and it's really easy to build for our developers. By the way, we already created with developers in collaboration. We created this animation already, and it's in test mode. So look at that, and boom. So you had a slide, just one slide, no animation, and then you click present, and then the animation starts. And that's it. This is how it will be presented. Or it will be presented in a little bit different way, where the speaker is talking slide by slide, word by word. So you hear, it's like a book. It's like reading a book. How it will be presented is really important when you're creating a presentation. So keep it in mind. And then why? Why you're creating this presentation? What is the reason? What is it for? If it's about conversions, well, then you have to know a little bit about psychology, and you have to know that, well, it's not ethical maybe, but when you're creating a deck, if it's a little bit more overwhelmed with information, then you overload the cognitive load. And if the speaker who is selling talks really fast, and then you will be even more and more overloaded with information, and then they will boost everything, every single slide with lots of powerful words that will go directly to your subconscious mind, and then in the end you will want to buy that product because what, you know what, because your brain is already overwhelmed and you're like, oh yes, 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 I want that. So this is conversational presentation and way of presentation. It can be something really creative and in minimalistic style, Swiss style, you know, lots of typography, just numbers, not so much graphics. Why you are creating it? Why are you creating it? Or maybe you want to make money. In this case, it should be catchy from the very beginning, and then it can be really boring in the middle, just because your goal was to sell it. And while I mean by boring, I don't mean that it's bad. I just mean that the presentation should deliver the information anyway. How it will be presented, and I mean, why it's important to create some catchy and really beautiful first slides, just to sell it, just to go to the market, just to be a little bit louder than everyone else, so people take a look at you. And by loud, I mean not like yelling. By louder, I mean to have some really catchy graphics or catchy typography or catchy way of presenting this presentation. So why? What is your reason for creating this presentation? And the final one is what's next. When you know what's next, I mean where after the presentation was presented, where it will be used then later. Is it like the end? Well, then it's one user experience. If it's after that, you will have to send it once you present it, then you will have to send it to the client via email. Well, in this case, you will have to think also about having a really good lightweight PDF file out of this presentation. Or maybe it will be just a link to a Figma. Or by what's next, it can be, well, let's imagine that you presented your speech on a conference, and then in the end, you want to provide to everyone who was on the conference and everyone who knows you, you want to upload it to SlideShare, and then this specific presentation will be presented in an embed form on your website. So keep in mind all these different things. Answer this question when you're creating something. And the more you practice these questions with every single thing that you are doing, trust me, it will be for you just like a second. Just in a second, you will, not in a second, but anyway, in a minute, you will answer these questions immediately, or you will ask them your client, or you will ask them the person who you will be creating your product for. or presentation for. So keep it in mind. This is important. Yes, I know, guys, this lesson is a little bit different, but it's so important to cover this theory before we move into practice. And I hope that you enjoy it, because I wanted to create it in a form like a masterclass, like a full masterclass. Just this lesson. After this lesson, I want you to be like, oh my God, that was mind blowing. That was mind blowing. I really loved this lesson. It's like, well, it's just not about Figma. It's just exactly about design. Wow. This is what I want you to feel after this particular lesson of this course. And this is just, imagine that course. Then inside of the course you have modules, and inside the module you have lessons, and the lesson is like the entire course. Yes, this is how much value I want to give you here. Let's move to the next point. And the next one is storytelling. If you're creating just, if you're just presenting anything, it's really great to know storytelling and how to tell a story. Whether you're creating stories on Instagram, whether you're creating posts. By the way, we'll cover storytelling specifically for Instagram posts and Instagram carousels, and also Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts. In the next module, where we'll be talking about design for content creators, in this specific module, let's talk about storytelling for presentations. Well, storytelling for presentations. What is the flow? At least it doesn't mean that you have to follow this particular flow, but at least this is something that I would recommend. Well, where we start? Of course, we start with the introduction. First of all, we have to know what is the topic, who is talking, where it's presented, some additional information, just the first slide, so we understand what is the starting point. Then we give some context, because people didn't know that you designed something. For example, if you're presenting for the show and tell, or people don't know who you are or why you are talking about this specific topic. So you have to give them the context, so they understand. So you will be on the same, like in the same room, and all of you will know what is the topic of this presentation. Everyone is on the same page. So we give context. Next thing, we talk about point B, where we wanna. So during this presentation, by the end of this presentation, where we will be, what you will learn after this presentation, what you will learn today, what people will get in the end of the presentation, what your client will achieve if it's a pitch for a client, what a client will achieve if they work with you or with your company. So this is the point B. We have to give this desired state first, so they can taste it, so people can taste, so they can get interested in what you're talking about, or in what the person will be talking about, the person who you created this presentation for. Okay? The next thing is point A. Then, when we showed where we're going, then we get back to the default, like, starting point, to the very first parameters, where we're starting from. It's similar to context, but now we talk specifically about where we're starting from. Then we talk about challenges, because in order to achieve point B, we will have some challenges and we will have to overcome them. The next thing is objections. People will definitely have questions over your presentation about this and that and that. What about this? What about that? So that's why it's really great if you are able to cover the objections, cover the questions during the presentation in the form of them. It can be kind of, Q&A, but inside of the presentation. Or it can be specific objections that, for example, if you are creating the sales webinar. By the way, we'll probably create a sales webinar presentation deck in the next module. Yes, we will do that. Anyway, objections. You cover all the objections, or at least some of them, or the most important ones, like money, time, you know. Then reasoning. It's really important to cover why we are doing all these things. For what? We have to know like where we're moving to. Why? If you don't know why, we don't have clarity. And if you don't have clarity, then in this case, we don't know why we should do something, why we should at least listen to. So this is where we increase engagement again, because over the presentation, the people's attention can go down, and then we have to bring it up. Down, bring it up. And this is what we do here. And then once we covered all these things, we jump to results. And this is kind of like point B. Or this is where we can predict some metrics, business metrics. Or this is the point where we start our sales pitch. Before that, it was informational pitch, and then we go to sales pitch. And then conclusion. And in the conclusion, depending on who you are creating it for and everything, the conclusion will be different. It can be about talking about next steps. It can be CTA. Yes, in the presentation, it can be CTA. A CTA to go to a website. A CTA to not to click on the button, but to watch that video. The conclusion can be, it's kind of outro, can be thanks for watching. Usually I don't recommend thanks for watching, thanks for your time, thanks for attention, because in these cases it's just like, okay, yeah, you're welcome, bye-bye. No, it's better to start something after presentation. It's better to have something in mind what will go next. So to start conversation like, so guys, what do you think about it? What do you think about the presentation? Do you have any questions? So now I'm ready to answer your questions. Conclusion should be just the beginning point for the next interaction. So this is the storytelling of the presentation. You can follow this specific example. You can remove some of the points, but I don't recommend you to remove at least, you know what, the minimum one. Let me show you the minimum of this thing. This, and probably that. No, we'll have to go back here. I'd say this is the minimum point. Introduction, context. Without context, nothing matters. Nothing, because if people don't understand what you're talking about, point B, point A, we have to show, because people always moving to the desired state from their from their pains. So we have to show where we're going and from where we're going. And then challenges. Without challenges, doesn't make sense. Well, it makes sense anyway to move, but there will be some challenges, and we have to think about them and predict them. And then we have to show the results, and of course, conclusion. So this is the minimum of storytelling. Keep it in mind when you're creating presentations. Then content. Content is king. Honestly, yes. That's the most important thing. The more I'm in the design industry, the more I understand that content is much more important than design. Sometimes content is the design itself. Yeah. Honestly, when it comes to presentations and websites, content is the most important. When it comes to UI, and I'm talking about mobile applications and TV apps or any kind of apps or web apps where we have a product where we mostly focused on UX writing rather than on content itself, then content, I would say, less important. There are some other things that we will cover in the mobile apps module. But when it comes to presentation, content is king. So once you know who you're designing for, you have the strategy, you defined user experience, you did your research, and you understood what the storytelling will be, like the main key points. It's time to create content. And it's really great if you have a copywriter who will create content. If you don't, maybe it can be provided by your client. If not, maybe it can be provided by some other people in the company. If still not, then probably it will be you. And if you are not a copywriter, if you are not familiar with how to create copy, if you are not familiar how to create copy for websites and what's the difference between copy for websites and presentations, well, it's better to learn a little bit more about psychology and to learn from all these experiences. I would definitely cover this in a specific way in one-on-one. I would help you with this particular point through the mentorship work or consultation, but we will not be able to cover absolutely every single aspect and specifically content, because there are so many different ways to create content and there are so many different types of presentations. And of course, we'll not be able to cover all of them. And specifically, this is a practical course. Just only this lesson and some other will be super important to cover theory for some specific topics. But try to find someone who will create content for the presentations. And if you can't, you'll create it yourself. And sometimes I'm pretty sure that you can be really creative with that, and you can create really great content. Especially if you already have strategy, if you did your user research, and not only user research, I would call it user experience research. And then if you define the storytelling for the presentation, content will be much easier. So like storytelling is like table of contents that will be covered in a presentation, where content is specific content for each table of contents. Got it, right? Okay, let's move to the next point. The next point is grid. I will say it here, I will say it in the next modules, I will say it everywhere. It's not the grid that defines the content and the layout. It's the content that defines the grid. And depending on the content that you will create, you will build different grids. But if it's too hard for you, and maybe you came to this course with a web design experience, in this case, well, you can go with a regular 12-column grid, and that's it. By the way, let me bring here really important information, that the size of the presentation is 1920 by 1080. This is a regular 16 by 9 type of presentation. Sometimes it can be 16 by 10, but in most of the cases, the full HD size, 1920 by 1080, is just perfect size of the presentation. Then columns. It can be 12 columns grid, 8 column grid, 7, 4, 3 columns. Now it's time to talk about the grid that I have here, because I think it's really interesting to cover something different rather than creating regular 12, 8, 4, 2 columns grids, right? And let me explain, by the way, all of these numbers. Well, 12 column grid is just a regular one. Sometimes in presentation you can use 16 column grid. It depends on the content that you have. In the typography masters course, I cover like everything about grids, but here we'll cover some of these things as well. So 12 column grid, the regular one. Okay, 8 column grid is when you have, for example, you know that you will have maximum 4 columns of the content. And that's it. So 8 columns will be more than enough. 7 column grid. Why 7? Because in this case you will be able to have asymmetrical layout. An asymmetrical layout looks much more interesting, more attractive, and at the same time more engaging. And in this case, 7 column grid will be really much better way to do that. Then 4 column grid, it's basically it's like 8 divided by 2 the same idea. And 3-column grid, and again, in 3-column grid, it can be 3 equal grids if you will have maximum 3 columns of content, or it can be non-regular asymmetrical view where you will have one column that is bigger than next to. Now let's create the grid that I have here. In order to do that, we go here, presentation 16 by 9, done, created. And here, let me show you what I have, not an auto layout. Grids, I click on these dots because I created already styles. How to create styles, you know, from the first module, Figma Fundamentals. I create that, and boom, here we have a grid. And it looks like that. And you're like, wow, what? Well, it's 7-column grid with an additional padding grid. I call it padding grid. What does it mean? So let me show you. And why 7 columns? You can have a title here, right? That goes, because we have padding, that goes up to here. And then you can have 2 columns of content here. That is much smaller than that. Boom. And it's similar to like 3 columns here, and like not 3 columns, 1 column here that is bigger than next to here. Done. The next thing, what is interesting about that, you can create something here that is big enough, like an image, and then the content on this side. You see this padding? It allows me to put the content, to have the space between the image and the content. But the image itself takes more space than the entire space here. I can go even further. I can go like that for content and like this for the image. And it will make much more engaging and interesting layout when I'm presenting something. I can have the image this big, and then the content, instead of there, it will be somewhere here with a up like that. Honestly, I would go with additional padding here. Like this. It looks really much more interesting rather than if we create just 2-column grids, so where everything will be right in the middle. Or we can go even further and to cover everything from left to right up to here. And here we'll have the content, or the content goes still here. And this will be the image point where we'll have something like, if it's a business topic, people talking about something, and here we have our content on the right side. You see, it's just a little bit more interesting way of presenting information where you can take a little bit more space on the right or on the left side. So we can change the direction, and we'll have to make some adjustments. This will go there, and this content will go up to here. Boom. It can be also part of the presentation. You see, it looks a little bit more interesting. You can achieve the same result with just 12-column grid, where you will give, for example, the left part 3 columns and the right part 9 columns. So if it's much easier for you, just go with that. In this case, for me, it's much easier to create content. How to create this type of grid? Just let's take a look. Here I have 2 grids. The first one is 7 columns, center, with a width is at this specific, not here, is this specific area, 220, as you can see. 220 width, offset, we don't have it because it's a center type grid, and Gada 0. Why Gada is 0? Gada 0 allows me to create just lines here. If I switch it off, you see it lines. If I create Gada like 20, then I have this type of grid. And I could have it here like that, 60, and because it's 60, 220 minus 60, 160. So It can be something like this, 7 columns, and we have a gap here, but we don't have the lines. Okay, we have the line where we can start from, but the next point takes space from us. We are not as flexible as when we have just lines. If you want to learn more about grids in general, like all the aspects of grid, I recommend you to take a look at the Grids and Layouts Masterclass, because there we cover all the grids for websites, for presentations, for mobile applications, and all the different types of them, starting from 1 column to up to 16 columns. So just go and take a look at that. I will leave the link in this specific lesson as well. But it's much, much easier to see the content when we have just lines. And here, as you can see, I also changed the color and I changed the opacity of the grid. So now we have lines here, done. But what's the problem with lines, just to have lines? Let's imagine that you have a heading here, and the heading is a little bit bigger, like 120 maybe, and it goes in 4 columns, okay. And on the right side, you will have the paragraph, the text itself. That is, of course, a little bit smaller, which will be like 32 maybe. Too small, 40. And it will be somewhere here. As you can see, the text is too close to each other. If it also has an image, and if you want to put text here as well, now the image is attached to the text. So probably in this case it would be better to start through the column, which is, well, it's too much space here. In this case we could create more columns here, but not for the center one. But there is much, much easier way to do that. We have these 7 columns, but in addition to these 7 columns, we create an additional grid that goes from right with 60, and that's exactly the gutter, the padding that we want to be between content. Offset is exactly the offset that goes from right to left to the point where it will start from. It can be 410 or minus 220, 1 column. And then we will start from here, but then the count should be 7. So now you have everything like super clear. It depends on what grid you prefer, what grid will allow you to present content in a much better way. You have content, and then you understand, okay, I want it to be a little bit more interesting, so I'll use asymmetrical grid. And because I'll be using asymmetrical grid, I want the content to start from there and to finish there, so it will go, so we'll add this additional padding to cover all the spaces and distances, and in this case image will be here and the text will be somewhere here, which will allow me to put the content like that. Command G, and this will be like kind of your presentation, or we can go even 1 column to the right to make it a little bit more, even more interesting, where the text will go from top left to the bottom right. Let's add again Command P and splash. We are still talking about business side, or maybe it will be technology. Not this type of technology. Doesn't make sense. Okay, probably it will be a much better way. Oh, code. We were talking about code here. And boom, here you have a presentation. To me, of course, it doesn't make sense to have it here. And it's still a little bit weird layout. I would probably go with something like at least this. But this is how you create this grid. And as I said, so the first one is center, so we just create, let's create another here. F 16 by 9, then layout grid plus, go here, grid, columns, and then you want to have something more interesting, but you have more flexibility. 9 columns. 9 columns, but not stretch center. From the center, we will have something about like 160 size. The gutter 0. This gives us lines. Because I don't see lines here, I want to make them a little bit more visible, so I'm changing opacity and color. Now I have lines that will allow me to create this content. Or maybe 7 is too much, 9 too much, 5, but then we'll increase the size of the columns. Something like this, 320. Perfect. But now, if I don't want to be in a situation where I have the image here and text attached to that, in this case, I will need some kind of gutter. And to create this gutter, we create another grid plus columns, but in this case, they will go from right, and we will need to measure this distance first, 160. So then we go back to grid, offset 160, this way we'll start. Then the size of our padding between columns, let's imagine it will be the same 60. And then the gutter is the gutter is the size of the column. How much did we set here? 320. When you set 320 minus so we have 160 on the right side, then we have 60, and then till the next one it will be 320 minus 60. Enter. Done. So this is how it works. So now we have padding, but also I'll change the color of it to something different so it's not so bright. And now we have additional padding that allows us to separate the text from the media, for example, from the graphics, or to separate the heading from the text on the right side. So this is how we create this type of grid that is a little bit more unconventional, but at the same time more interesting. Grids shouldn't stop you. Sometimes you can go, you know what, just click here, columns, 1, stretch with a margin from both sides, 120 or 150, and that's it. And all the content later in the presentation that you will create will be right in the middle, where you will have heading and then image. The next slide that you will create, it will be, of course, heading is usually much bigger, 120. The next slide will be heading and paragraph or description. And that's it. And this will be the entire presentation. Yes, it will be boring, but sometimes it works. Don't allow greed to stop you from creating the project, the presentation itself. But I wanted really to show you how you can be creative with grids to present the content the best way. Okay? Got it now, right? Let's go further. The next important point when you're creating presentation, layout. Layout can be completely different. When we'll start creating presentation in one of the next lessons in this module, but one of the next lessons of this series about presentations, we will cover some of the layouts. And yeah, the layout in this case depends on the grid. So content defines the grid, and then grid defines the layout. Got it. Next thing, typography. Typography for the presentation is usually depends on, well, audience. Because if you're creating something like a corporate for a client, and you understand that, well, it should be something not super creative, and typography shouldn't be seen as typography. People should see just text itself. People should see just content, not typography. For example, when you look at these slides, right, you see how everything is sleek, so beautiful, so perfect. Why so? I'm using Helvetica Neue, if you want to. And it looks amazing because Helvetica itself is a piece of art already. And that's why everything looks like a finished work. But honestly, I wouldn't use Helvetica if I created this masterclass or if I created this presentation for clients. I would use something different. I would use something like Verdana, something really, really super boring and invisible, something like this. Or I would go with Montserrat. Yep. So now you don't see the typography itself. You see the text, you see the content. And that's why Montserrat is one of the most popular typefaces when it comes to non-designers. Non-designers really love Montserrat because it's easy to read, because it's wide, which is again makes it more readable, has great legibility, and at the same time people don't see typography. They don't see the typeface, they see content. So that's why the first thing is audience. Who can define the, because my audience are designers, so that's why it looked like a design, like a sleek design. Audience. Next thing is brand. Sometimes when you're creating something for a specific brand, then you are following the brand guidelines of that client or of your company, or you have brand typography yourself, brand typefaces, so you're using them. Like, yeah, my brand typefaces are Bebas Neue, Bebas Pro Neue, and also Helvetica Neue. That's why I'm using them in most of the cases. And the final type is random. This is where you just define, you know what, I don't have brand. I understand that, well, my audience is some different people. Then you can go here with something like Fira Sans. Looks interesting, cool, awesome. Source Sans Pro. A little bit better, a little bit more elegant, amazing. Then maybe, of course, you will choose Inter. It's not so interesting as Helvetica, but also a good point. Or just go with Roboto. It doesn't matter. Because if you have to present something, it's better to present something with something people can read rather than to spend weeks defining what typeface to choose, and in the end, you're like, I haven't finished my presentation yet, so I probably won't be able to present it. So don't spend too much time here as well. Choose the typography based on audience, brand, or just choose randomly something that is readable, understandable, has good accessibility, which is defined by readability and color, and that's it. And go further. And later we'll also create some style guides, because when you're creating presentations, it's better to create a style guide from the very beginning. So then later, if you think like, okay, I have 10 different clients, and for all of them I have to create a presentation, but at the same time each of them are a little bit different, so I can change. I'll create a kind of presentation template for myself, like presentation kit for myself, and then I will just change typefaces easily, colors easily, because I will use styles, and that's it. We'll cover how to create typography style guide and color style guide for the presentation also later in this series of this module. Adjustments. What does it mean? Why did I include that? Well, when it comes to presentation presentation is graphic design. And the difference between web design, mobile apps, and graphic design, so graphic design is static, while web design and mobile design, or just that design, is dynamic. What does it mean, dynamic? You can open the same app on different screens, and your content will be presented in a different way because of different size, different width of the screen. Website, it can be responsive. People can stretch their screens, squeeze them. And in this case, of course, it will be different, completely different. Content will be dynamic. Dynamically will, not the content itself will change, but the layout will change because the grid will be squeezed. So when it comes to graphic design, here we have static view. It's just 1920 by 1080 presentation. That's it. And in this case, well, it's better to be a little bit more pixel perfect. And what do I mean by that? Well, as you can see, this heading and this paragraph, they're not aligned. Why? Why they're not aligned? How is it possible? Even if I make this thing, they're still not aligned. I changed the letter spacing. They're still not aligned. Why? Let's check the boxes. Maybe we did something wrong. Let's select this one. No, the box is aligned. And this box, it's also on the grid. What's the problem? Well, every single letter has their own paddings. Every single letter. If I leave just H here, you see it has padding on the left, it has padding on the right, and it has padding at the top and at the bottom. But the thing is, the bigger the letter, the bigger the padding. And because of that, we have to make these adjustments. So let's bring back the word heading. When it comes to graphic design, what we have to do, well, not have to do, should do. At least this is my recommendation, because I create many presentations and I create many designs, and I can tell you that pixel perfection is not so important. Only designers see that, and of course it's something that, well, brain still feels something is wrong. So if you don't, users' brain or viewers of the presentation brain feel something weird, something wrong, we have to make adjustments. And these adjustments are some things like moving some of the text that will sit exactly on the grid and that everything will be aligned. Now heading and paragraph are aligned. Let's take a look at this view. You see static pixel is aligned with the grid, but adjustment go a little bit out of the grid. But when I select, even this text is out of the grid. Why so? Because I did adjustments. It's optical adjustment of the content. And the image itself here, it goes from left to right, everything is perfect. But the text here, as you can see, it was misaligned. So that's why we have to move the contents that it sits on one line as paragraph. Oh, we can go in closer. Can we go here? Yep. So they sit on one line together just because each letter in typography has their own padding, and we have to keep that padding in mind. When we make text bigger, it means that we shouldn't only change the letter spacing, but we also have to make an adjustment of the position of the first word in that specific paragraph that we are creating. So this is where we create these adjustments. Now, because we are still here, I want to show you also how to create this view. Maybe you want to create them for wireframes, or maybe when you'll create your template for presentations. how to create this cross here without going with pen tool and then going like this, and then we create dots here. This is one of the ways to do that, but there is a little bit different way. So you create a rectangle, okay, then you go to the edit mode, select on the all the dots, go to vector, join selections, join selection. You click here, done, created. Now you press Shift X and you have this intersection of all the points, and if you want to, you can also add fill with a different color, something light here, something lighter here, but a little bit darker than that one. And now you have the rectangle for like a template for example, when you want to create a wireframe, digital wireframe, or to show that the image should go here. In this case, you just do that and it will work. It will stretch, it will have any size that you want. This is how you do, this is how you use Figma Pro Secrets. Probably you've never used joint selection, right? So now you know where to use it and how to use it, how to create one. Perfect. So once adjustments are done, this is where we can go to style. And by style, I mean what the graphics you will use, what colors you will be using for your particular presentation. It can be absolutely any style that you would like. Here, just an example that we can go with the minimalism style. As you can see, all my presentations, all my masterclasses, all my courses, I use the minimalism. Why so? Because I want to focus and guide people who watch my courses on a specific element. And I don't want to overwhelm them with additional information, like let's imagine like these things here. That one will be yellow, another one will be purple, like pink, and both of them will have layer blur 200, and then we'll bring it to the very back of the screen and we will change opacity a little bit. And now let's make this even more interesting. We will put them on the other side, Shift H, Shift V, put here, but now this part will be a little bit smaller while this one will be a little bit bigger. It's still kind of minimalism, but I would say it goes more to a creative way where you can go with these ideas. And as you can see, we can create them super fast and easy. Later, I'll show you in the next lesson, I'll show you how to create it specifically. We'll go like step by step. But let's get back to styles. The style can be minimalism, it can be coach style. This is how I call this style, coach style. Why I call it this way? Well, because, okay, the color is on top of everything still. Here, no. So coach style, because if you go and take a look at different live coaches, you will see that usually they have the same style. All of them, they have the same style, and usually because they create their presentations on Canva, and Canva has their own templates. You can go and take a look at the different templates. Maybe you can get inspiration from there. I personally, as a designer, because I design everything with Figma, I take inspiration from Dribble, or sometimes from Behance, or sometimes from even store. When I go to IKEA, for example, I look at all those posters and I'm like, oh my God, I love this layout. Oh, I love this idea of putting the image on this side and text here. Oh, the price is really big here. I can change the price to some number like 90% to show like the metrics changed by 90%. And this is where I get inspiration from. But you can also get inspiration from different areas like Canva as well. Then brutalism. I'm a completely not a huge fan of brutalism. If you go to Gumroad, you will see brutalism style. That's not my thing, but for some people like it. It's different. Everyone is minimalism is maybe it's too overused. I will still continue using that because it just provides better user experience, in my opinion. Corporate style. Corporate style is something that is a little bit more in particular colors. It has a specific typography, usually they're a little bit more boring. But by boring, I mean from design perspective, because from client perspective, they are exactly what they have to, what they want to see. They want to see what's inside, not the wrapper, not the, I don't know, like not just something that is outside. No, they want to see the content. And that's why it's usually has a specific colors. Then business style or marketing one, this is where you have lots of infographics. How to create infographics we'll also cover in this series, in this module. And then I call it like elegant or brand style. This is where you use display typefaces that create like every single slide like a piece of art, which is awesome, but only if you understand who you're designing for and you know exactly that that's exactly what they should see. Because in most of the cases, what I saw from like these presentations, people look at each slide and each slide look like a piece of art, but behind this art, you don't see what's inside, you don't see the content. So that's why just be careful with elegant or brand style. I just called it this way. You can find and call them different way, like minimalism and brutalism. That's definitely incorporate. That's definitely like styles. You can call them this way. But business, elegant, and coach, this is just my naming for that. But just keep in mind that you can have different styles. The most important to keep consistency across all the slides in one presentation, within one presentation. Okay, now let's go further. Graphics. When it goes to graphics, it will, again, it depends on the style that you're using. Maybe you will not have infographics at all. You will use just numbers. Something like these, condensed typefaces like Beba's New or Roboto condensed. But still not too condensed, maybe Anton. Do I have this? Yep. Boom, something like really bold, or impact. Impact definitely will be bold and perfect number. Or maybe if I have it here, Dean condensed. Yep. So beautiful. I would also use empty Knox, but unfortunately I don't have it here. It's really a really great condensed typeface. If you can buy one, I definitely recommend. Oh, that's a really good one. Neutronic, cool. Not the best one, I would say, when it comes to. It's all by me. Let's go to Google Fonts. It will take time for us to find something even condensed, but at the same time really interesting. Antonio, not. I don't like the. I wouldn't say that it's a well-designed typeface, because the percentage sign is much wider than the 4, and 4 is not consistent with the 0. So basically, I don't know who designed that, but not the best way, not the best typeface. So you got the idea. Sometimes you could go with banners, boom, something. Let's make it playful. You know what? Boom. This is a Supercell company that create those games. So we go with banners for everything. And the game that we just discussed today, by 40% our DAO grew plus 40% DAO. But for DAO, daily active users, this is the metric that is used in business, so you can focus on that metric as well. And here about is something a little bit less interesting. And here it will be like 40 and right below it, and semi-bold. boom, as you can see, so you can go with this style, but you have to know who you're creating it for. The next thing, graphics, when it comes to graphics or media that will be used, you can go with this style that we'll create in one of the next lessons, different backgrounds. It can be this type of background, it can be the background without those lines, but maybe we'll have something like this. Let me switch from the dash one to the solid one. That will go like that. And then move up. Done. Select all the lines. Move them, bring them to the top. V. And much wider. Still inside. Like that. Maybe we'll create some additional graphics like this. And then it will be also a gradient that goes from blue to something purple. Maybe not purple, but just dark blue. Light one. I really loved when it was the light one. And size 1. So maybe you will have this corporate style where you will have all these lines that show the future. Usually it was like that. How to create these things we will also talk a little bit later in one of the next lessons. Or it can be an infographic like that shows that everything grew by this %, but some metrics went down, which is fine because that's exactly what we were looking for. And then you will use for these guys this color, and the most important like that. How to create infographics, again, we'll cover this later. But when you're creating presentation, you have to know what you're creating it for, and if it's more creative, then you can go with this style. If it's a presentation for the game company where you're working at, you can use your brand typefaces and instead of graphics to use numbers. Or if it's something really super corporate, then you can go with infographics. And sometimes if you want to show like some additional things like intersection of different areas and then like different layers, then you create something like this. How to create all of them in the next lessons. But just keep in mind that you can do that. The next one is test. Every single time test your presentations. Always test. Go from slide 1 to slide last one and check that everything exactly where it should be and that no slides that are missing, because when you will present that, you will not have time to change things. So you will just present. So test your presentations. And one of the final things, if you can add animations and motion, you can go with it. Go for it. If it's something creative. If you're creating like a corporate one or for webinars, sales webinars, I don't recommend you to create animations, because they will distract people from what you're talking about. And in this case, you will just lose their attention. While they can look great, but for corporate and sales webinars, I don't recommend it to use this kind of animation and motion. But when it comes to graphic design, when it comes to show and tell, to presentations in the company, to show to other designers, to show your presentation to your stakeholders, and sometimes to clients, it will cause that wow effect. Everything about motion design covered in the motion UI design, and you have a discount for that, by the way, in the first module. You can take a look at that. So then go for it. Create those animations where the first slide look like that, and then when you go to the next slide, this information disappears, the new appears, and I'm like, wow, what? How did you do that? Designers will say, or client might say, oh, wow, that was cool. You see, so animation always gives motion. Just add E here, and we will have emotion. So motion always causes emotion. So keep it in mind, and if you know how to create animations in motion and where you know where to use them, go for them. And the final thing, present your idea, the presentation itself. If you're creating it with Figma, then in Figma here in the top panel, you have this view to present and preview. Preview is one of the newest features where you can just press Shift Space, and then you will have your presentation, and you can go like presentation with Figma, perfect. So you don't have to go to the presentation mode, you will see everything here, like here. Probably it was on this side. Okay, like that. And you go through the entire presentation, okay, awesome. So we covered everything that we wanted, amazing. Or maybe you just click present, and then that's exactly how you will present it. So you go here, you go to full screen view, you put your cursor somewhere outside of the presentation, that's it. Now this is your presentation, and you go, hey guys, today we'll be talking about design. In this design for secrets module graphic design, you see, it's better to test a little bit. So graphic design module, presentations with Figma, or how to create a really amazing deck for your client, for a creative market to make a little bit more money, or how to create a deck for a sales webinar. Let's dive in. Today we'll be talking about all the aspects that the presentation consists of. It will be strategy, content, typography, color, styles, like all these different things. So let's go step by step and cover every single type. Strategy, we'll always start with strategy. We go from point A to point B, so we have to know where we start and where we're moving to. And we think like, what will be the shortest way to go from point A to point B? And it works and applies to presentations as well. User experience. When it comes to user experience, we understand that presentation is a project that will be presented to other people. So we have to provide good user experience, seamless user experience, so they don't think about the proportions, they don't think about typography, they don't think about style and colors. They just consume the content that you deliver to them. And in this case, you have to know all the answers to the question, who, where, when, wow, why, how, and what's next. Once you answered all those questions, go to storytelling and create a really compelling, beautiful story for your presentation. The story that will sell, the story that will attract attention, the story that will convert. But always provide context first. Then show them where they are going to. Then show them where we started from and what challenges are ahead of us. Then handle objections. After that, show the result that we will come to, and go into conclusion. But with a conclusion, usually I recommend you to ask some question or to start the next interaction. And the interaction can be, go to this link, download that file here, and the link below, or mail to, and then your email, how to contact you, or ask your questions. So basically, this will be the conclusion. Once you understood the user experience, once you build the storytelling, it's time to go to content. And content is king. When it comes to presentation, content is king, because we have to think about what content we'll present, but at the same time, we have to understand what we will say in addition to what we'll show. And what will show exactly the content that will be presented on the presentation. So think about it, like the extended version that you will say and the condensed version of the content that will be presented. Then when you have content, you think about like how I'm going to present it. Should be interesting or a little bit more boring. Interesting, asymmetrical layout, asymmetrical grid. A little bit more boring, well, but boring means a little bit more corporate. Let's say it this way. A little bit more corporate than symmetrical one. For symmetrical layout, we have to use this grid. For asymmetrical one, we'll use this grid. If we want to go with something interesting, then it will be this way. But at the same time, we understand, well, at some points, when we'll present our content, some of our content will show like 5 different benefits that people will get. And we want to show them one by one, which means that we at least have to have 5 columns, or it should be 10 columns that we will give for each benefit. We will give 2 columns. Okay, so this is how content actually defines the grid. Got it. All right, so now when we have grid, we can go to the layout and we can create different layout. Like that. Yeah, because I added a little bit like additional slides. I showed you how to create grids, so that's why we have this slide. We didn't plan that. Layout. Based on the content and grid, we define the layout and we create the layout that we will use in our presentation. And then we go to typography. We define the typography. When we have content, first of all, we can start with just one typeface, and we will define what typefaces we'll use later. But that's exactly the point where we can already define them. What typeface we will use for headings and what typeface we'll use for paragraphs, or will it be the same typeface? That's the question. And should be defined by the audience, brand, or we will choose something randomly. But by randomly, I mean still readable and accessible. But then we'll make some adjustments, because once we start creating something, maybe we can lose some alignment. And in this case, it's better to adjust alignment, adjust letter spacing, adjust line height. So all these different things we have to keep in mind, because it will be presented, and maybe sometimes people will want to download our presentation and they will see that, and we don't want to see them some inconsistencies or, broken lines. So in this case, we will go with something perfect, pixel perfect. And once we define the typefaces, we put all the content in our presentation. Everything is done. Now we can add some additional infographics, and we can define the style of the presentation. And the style of the presentation can be completely different. Maybe we'll add lots of different images. Maybe we'll add additional really bold lines if we want to go brutal. Maybe we just decide to go corporate, and in this case we'll define our color palette in a little bit different way, and it will be really mild, and in most of the cases it will be blue. Okay? Once we define the style, it's time to create some infographics. Graphics and some media that we are going to add, this step will take most of the time. And we don't want to waste all this time from the very beginning without creating a presentation itself. No, this is one of the final steps, because by this moment we already have the entire presentation. And within this presentation, we already have all the content inside. But now we can improve our presentation with some graphics. But because we have to create it, or we have to find it somewhere, it will take time. So that's why this is one of the final steps of our presentation. And this is where we start creating it here and adding on each slide. Because if we have really tight deadlines, maybe we won't have enough time to create all these graphics. So then in this case, we'll go just with numbers, or we'll go with just additional colors and images from Unsplash. Once it's done, the presentation is done. But now it's time to test it and to go step by step through all the slides to understand that everything is perfect. Everything is exactly what we want to say, the way we want to say, and the way we want to present it. Okay, cool. So we test it, everything is perfect, we love it. We can, if we have still time, we can make something beautiful. We can add emotion. We can add motion design here. And motion design is always about state A and state B, and what is happening between these two states. But when it comes to presentation, we have slide 1 and slide 2, or slide 52 and slide 53. What will happen between these two slides? How they will connect together? Can we connect them together? Well, yes. We can take, for example, the image from one slide that will disappear when we'll go to the next slide, and the new image will appear. And you're like, what? Wow, this is so cool. How we came to this idea. How is it possible? And then you're like, wow, this is how we create these presentations. And because we know motion UI design, we can do that super fast and easy. And now it's time to present our idea, to pitch our idea to a client, to present our designs to our company, to show to our designers what we just accomplished, to show to those people sitting in front of us, those 1,000 people sitting in front of us, something new in the design industry, or to present that sales webinar to those people who want to buy something from us, but they just didn't know that we have something for them. That's the presentation, and that's it. As you can see, escape, go to the regular mode, go back. So, and this is where we have our presentation. It looks like that. We could go in a horizontal way. I prefer to create a presentation this way, and when I'm talking about within one topic, when I want to say a little bit more, then I go horizontally. But every single new idea, I go vertically. As you can see, every single slide here is a new idea. But within the slide, I can go horizontally and, for example, user experience, and here I will cover specifically who, the question who. And the question who, maybe it can be, different way. User experience, who. And then here I will have a little bit different text. And then I'll go with each question to the right. So this is how you create presentations. And as you can see here, let's take a look at the anatomy of the presentation. Usually it has some corners, I call it corners, where we provide some context about in each slide, people know where exactly they are. This is also part of user experience. Then we also have some brand identity. So this is Alexander Hess Design Academy, Art Design Academy, and this is our premium program that they see here. This is Art Design Academy and presented by Alexander Hess. So, done. And then the content is inside. And because I prefer minimalistic style, then because of that, I present everything in a minimalistic way, in a minimalism style where we have a clearly defined title, and then we have some graphics if we need to, and then we have some copy, some additional copy that allows us to present it the way we want it to present. So guys, it was a really long lesson. It's like a masterclass. Probably you are tired, maybe a little bit exhausted. Maybe I hope that you took some breaks, you put on pause and got back to this lesson again to continue it. but finally you watched it to the very end. Now you know what is a presentation, what it consists of. If you're already familiar with how to create presentations, now you know a little bit more, and maybe the puzzle, the picture itself is a little bit more fulfilled. The next thing, you learned more about grids. If you want to learn even more, then I recommend you Grids and Layouts Masterclass. You learned about typography masters, motion design, motion UI design masterclass. So if you want to dive into those specific topics, then just go for it. If everything that you get from here is enough for you, that's enough. Just go and present, just go and take a look at what you're already creating, but just go through this list of things and check everything that you already created. I hope that it was super useful lesson for you. Yes, we covered theory. Next, we'll go with practice. But before practice, we'll cover some things that will help us with practice. It will be also practical lessons. Now, you are ready to go further. It was a long masterclass. It wasn't a lesson, it was a masterclass. And I hope that you enjoyed that. And now you can create your presentations much easier and in a little bit different way that will make your workflow much more efficient, and at the same time your presentations clearer and more beautiful, and at the same time more attractive and maybe conversational. So see you in the next lesson. I'm proud of you that you watched it till the end. Great job. See you there.